And we are now to hear from our sisters in the United States. We're going to meet Lierre Keith, Jesika Gonzalez, and Dansky, who are about to tell us about what happened on Monday today. They have chosen to call this section Non-Violent Women Attacked by Transactivists in California. We have a video for you, and then we will hear directly from them.
And they need to be talked about. Public needs to know how violent they are and how many times people do not get the help if they're going to be brought back into society. They come back in worse. So my question is, I recognize this person as a man, and I'm sorry that the travesty occurred to her victims and herself. But do you think that it's justice if she's put in a violent with other men because they're stronger?
You know, we are not out here to engage right now with the public. We're doing a silent protest, but you can go to the website of this organization and you can read all about it, and we will dialogue with you. We're not going to do it today.
I did read about it briefly here. Okay. And I do have criminal justice.
We're open to it. We're just not doing that today.
Okay.
Thank you.
I do have that education. Oh, I don't have you. Whoa. What's this about? Why are we doing this? They're violent. They're violent men. They're violent men. You. This is male. Why are we doing this?
These are violent men. These are violent men. They're violent men. They just had fun. Yeah, these are the men that we like to not have to be in prison with. So.
What the hell?
What did you think they were?
This is what they think they do. I don't know why you would think anything. I don't quite get the.
I don't get that. Why did they took your sign?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Oh my God, freedom of expression. Who are these people?
Yes.
Holy crap.
And
I didn't even plan on being here.
Thank you for being here.
Holy
Hey,
crap.
buddy. Hey, buddy.
This is what we're up against. And this has happened in Portland, in Tacoma, in
Why can't we have a
Chicago,
dialogue?
in New York.
Why can't we have a dialogue?
I have people
Sorry.
Hello.
Holy crap. I wasn't prepared for that.
I'm so sorry you were in the midst of it.
This is what we're talking about.
Why can't you? Why can't you just have a dialogue? I'm sorry, he's very friendly.
I know, I'm just not a dog
I'm sorry.
person.
No, it's okay. We love your dog. It's okay.
So I know about
What? What in the world?
This is why we're here. And this is what they do to us when we try to speak.
You know what Dana Rivers did?
I got some of it, but
Three people. She killed. Yes.
She killed 2 lesbians. And took their clothes off.
and then I flipped it. Some
Well, that's a very tragic person. Yes.
Okay. The woman 28 times in the face.
I just briefly read about it, and I don't know the extent of the case. You know, I don't know.
You have eggshell on you.
It's eggs, so they're not vegans, and some kind of stuff.
Well, you have a little bit. You're bleeding a little bit. A teeny tiny bit. You're bleeding. Yeah, where the. Oh no, it's not like bleeding out, but there's a scratch. I can see blood on your face. Yeah.
I have Q-tips. I'm fine. I wanted to just get evidence.
Okay.
It's in her ears. So.
I understand.
Right about that.
I just don't. I think you have the right to speak out.
Right across the street. You're right.
But that's one of the primary rights of America.
Yeah, I agree.
What the hell's wrong with you? I can't believe they did that. That was
Welcome, sister.
City to city, city to city. This is what they do all over. And as you see, we were standing there holding signs. Someone who knows the area, what is this called? I know.
It's the Alameda.
She's saying that about the Embarcadero. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, you're not.
Well, it's impressive every time I say it. So, as I said, we have with us Lierre Keith, Jesika Gonzalez, and Dansky. They are going to talk to us in that order to tell us about what happened on Monday to them.
I have never been so proud of a group of women. We did so good. So I'm going to talk about before. Jesika is going to talk about what happened during, and then Kara's going to talk about what we've done since and what our plan is moving forward. So in the beginning, in 1980, I will go very fast. I read Mary Daly and I became a radical feminist. So It had never taken me 6 months to read a book. It took me 6 months to read gynecology, and I launched fully into being a radical feminist. So the thing is, it was 1980, right? So in the early 80s, when I found radical feminism, I got an incredible political education just from joining all the different feminist groups that I could find. So there were seminars and workshops and women's bookstores and conferences and festivals. Anything that you wanted, you could find. There was just this entire culture that was based on political resistance that, you know, I just stumbled into at age 16, 17, and I never looked back. I got everything I needed out of that movement. There was always somebody in the room who could explain to you what was wrong with capitalism. There was somebody in the room who could tell you what is the connection between masculinity and militarism. There was somebody in the room who would walk you through the rape of the wild and the rape of women. We had a complete framework to explain everything that was wrong with the world, and we were right. We also had very specific trainings about how to be an activist. I personally went to Greenham Common, and I also went to Seneca, which was the US version of the same thing. I've been arrested 6 times doing civil disobedience. And I'm saying all this because it became very clear to me a few years ago that women are joining this movement, and that's fabulous. And I'm not saying this as a criticism. It's just an observation. We don't have any of that anymore. So women join maybe for one issue, and they sort of bump into the rest of these ideas, maybe if they're lucky, but they're definitely not getting political training. And we're reinventing the wheel over and over again. So when I think about, for instance, the civil rights movement, I mean, they very specifically had a place called the Highlander Institute, the Highlander Folk School, and it was based on the Danish folk school movement. And they set up in 1932 in Tennessee, and their goal was to train labor activists, but it became clear very quickly that the center of action was really the civil rights movement to stop segregation and voting rights and all of this stuff. So they were like the nerve center of the civil rights movement. And you could name anybody from the luminaries to the foot soldiers, they had probably been through Highlander. So Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, the 4 guys who did the first sit-in in North Carolina, Ralph Abernathy, all of them had been, John Lewis, they'd all been through Highlander. And which is to say that, you know, we can bring all our passion and all our courage, but if we don't have training, if we don't understand the plan, it's a lot harder to get where we're going. They all had that training. And I got that training, you know, again, more informally, but through what radical feminists and lesbian feminists were doing in the 80s. And it's just not there anymore. So I feel a great deal of urgency about this, seeing how things are going out there in the United States. So, okay, this slide that we're looking at, this is from the book that I co-authored called Deep Green Resistance. And this is our taxonomy of action. So over on the left are all the ways that you can refuse to do something that your government, your church, your society, your whoever is trying to get you to do. So those are acts of omission. So strikes, walkouts, tax resistance, conscientious objectors, all this kind of stuff, ways that you can withdraw from the system. And then you have acts of commission. So these are things that you can do to try to interrupt the flow of power, to try to educate, to try to build movements. And finally, at the very end of that, way over on the right, you have direct confrontation and conflict. So actually joining the fight. There at the very bottom, you can see there's this sort of slider, like over with lobbying and protests, you need more people to make it effective. Over on the other end, you need fewer people, but it's a lot more risky. Okay, there's a lot more danger involved when you're actually doing a direct confrontation with power. So that's sort of, you know, the slider that you're on at any given moment. So part of the problem, I think, is that we think we're here. All right, we think that we are, you know, we're still doing things like expressing our basic civil rights, and that shouldn't be a problem. We've already won those rights to speak. We've won the rights to assemble in public, to air our grievances. People fought for hundreds of years to get those rights, especially women. We fought to be able to speak in public, to be able to participate in civic life. Some women are still fighting for those basic rights around the world. Saudi Arabia, I'm looking at you. Iran, go for it. But in the West, we're supposed to have won these rights already, right? It's done, it's finished, we already got it. We're actually here. We're essentially doing direct confrontations with power whenever we gather in public as radical feminists, as quote TERFs. We don't know that, and we're not trained for it. And this is why I feel this urgency about the situation. I don't think we have enough collective understanding as a movement to even make the decision about whether to use this technique of nonviolent direct action or not. So I'm trying my hardest to get this information out there. And so one example that we talk about a lot when we've been doing our trainings is the part of the civil rights movement. There was an action called the Children's Crusade. This was in Birmingham. They ran out of adults essentially who were able to, risk their jobs, risk their lives, risk, everything to do these confrontations. And the only people left who were willing were the high school students. And in fact, some younger kids as well. But they went ahead and did it. And there's incredible footage from the time watching these kids do this action. But my point here is that there's two things. There's the stated purpose of their march. And that was simply to march downtown to the mayor peacefully and talk to the mayor about why segregation was wrong and why they should stop having segregation in Alabama. That's a very reasonable thing to ask for, and they were going to do it very reasonably. That's the stated purpose. The strategic goal, and this is a direct quote, the goal, get a reaction from the racist officials that would not only spotlight the injustice of the South, but gain national attention and support. The goal was not to get safely from point A to point B. The goal was not to stay safe. Quite the opposite. The goal was to get a reaction from racist officials that would make the structural violence visible. And this is always the goal when you're doing actual nonviolent direct action. The violence is there. The violence on which the system depends is revealed when you have a nonviolent challenge. And that nonviolent challenge doesn't create the violence. It doesn't create the reaction. That's there already. It reveals the violence that's been there the whole time. So that's what we try to train women in. We try to get them to understand the history of this technique that, in my lifetime alone, millions of people have used this with great effect around the world. You can get legal reforms, challenges to different things in the law or across society, whatever it is you're confronting. Nonviolence has been used to destroy empires. It's been used to bring down dictators. It's been used to defend legitimate governments from coups. So literally millions of people have used this very successfully. And we can do it too. I think that this is a technique that's ready-made for people in our position. We have no money, we have no power, we have no government agency, we don't have the media, we don't have giant tech companies. We've got pretty much nothing except righteousness on our own courage. So our goal was, again, to make the violence visible. And this case of Dana Rivers, if you don't understand who he was, I would suggest going to Kara Dansky's Substack. She's got really good information all there, all the links you would ever want. But this is a horrible man who's been a, quote, transgender activist for decades. He protested Michigan Women's Music Festival. He's honestly just a horror scene. He wrote 3 books of pornography, 2 of which are still for sale on Amazon, which are completely sadomasochistic, fetishistic, like diaper fetish, like really vile, like just the bottom of the barrel, vile stuff. And then he murdered 2 lesbians and their teenage son, really brutally. The one woman, he stabbed her 40 times, 28 times in the face. They said that she was, quote, unrecognizable. That was how brutal he was. So, this is the trajectory of this movement. And we want people to see that. So we went out to the courthouse. His sentencing is coming up. And there was a big court thing that was happening that day. So we decided, and as it turned out, it was actually the anniversary of the Montreal Massacre as well. So it was a very grim day for us. So we decided that we were going to get women trained in this technique. Even if it was a small group of us, we would know it was women who had promised to follow our guidelines of nonviolence. They understood what we were doing, hopefully came to understand the importance of using this technique, how it worked and why it works, that nonviolence is the fulcrum that we've got to lever our cause into the public spotlight. And we did have a small group of us who committed to it. We had a great training all weekend. It's just so wonderful to be in a group of radical feminists or women who are leaning toward radical feminism and really just spend 2 days together talking about really serious political things and whether or not this technique is the best for us. And we just had a great time. So then the day came. So I'm going to turn this over to Jesika and she can do her part.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm really glad for this opportunity to appear on Feminist Question Time again. I spoke around this time last year to discuss TERF Collective. This time I'm here, of course, to discuss our recent demonstration in Oakland, California. The demonstration was held at the Renee Davidson Courthouse, the site of the Dana Rivers murder trial, the morning of the demonstration. We sent 2 women ahead of the rest of us to serve as scouts. These were our camera women. One would be responsible for filming our speeches as well as taking still photos of us throughout the demonstration. Beforehand, we had planned for this woman to blend in with the crowd, for her physical safety and to protect her ability to take good photos and footage. We needed her to not be a target of any trans identity supremacists that might seek to attack the rest of us. The second woman was too a camera woman, but her role was also as a general participant. She would be vulnerable to attack like any of the rest of us. This was by design. The second woman wore a body cam that generated all the great footage that is by now seen all over and by so many and opened our presentation today. Sending scouts to survey the scene in advance is always a good idea. What we've learned from over a year of doing these demonstrations of all kinds on this issue is that our opposition likes to camp out. You can trust these trans identity supremacists, especially depending on how large a group they muster, to beat you to your location almost every time. If you're contemplating a demonstration, certainly a public one, you must expect to be greeted by them when you arrive. Because we were prepared to be overrun with trans identity supremacist terrorists, we originally had decided to gather at a staging point where we get our sashes on and get our banners ready, then head to the courthouse together. You want to do this so you don't spend any time being wrestled down by the opposition while you're still unfurling banners. The message is the most important part of the demonstration. This aspect of our plan changed when one of our scouts sent back word she sensed the opposition was already using our chosen staging point as their rally point. So instead, we merely proceeded directly to the courthouse. There was quite conveniently a small sitting area off to the side of the steps where we had chosen to do our speaking. This served as a perfectly suitable staging area. So that is where we pinned our sashes, unfurled our banners, and got ourselves organized. Then we walked a few paces to the steps where we lined up for some photos from our primary camera woman. She took some stills of us at the base of the steps and then cued us to begin our speaking portion. This portion of the demonstration was live streamed to WDI USA's Facebook channel. Please feel free to check that out. Our demonstration was sobering and solemn, reflecting the gravity of the situation. A man has brutally murdered a lesbian couple and their son in their home, and there are people that fight for him to be construed as the victim, deserving of our empathies and even worse, our protection. Kara spoke first. She covered the facts of the case, one in which she is now our movement expert. She spoke out against the injustice that is housing Dana Rivers and many other violent men like him with women. Lierre spoke next. Given the date of our demonstration, just one day off from the anniversary of the École Polytechnique massacre, Lierre couldn't help but be reminded of the price women pay for defying men. I spoke after Lierre. I said that what I know to be the truth, this ideology gained popularity on the misguided belief that men that call themselves trans women are the most harmless and vulnerable of all men. We now know that notion is a complete lie. I also encourage women to find the courage and fortitude within themselves to come out and engage in, as Kara puts it, a record of our dissent. Melinda was our last, and in my opinion, most powerful speaker. She closed our time on the steps by reading a list of the names of those murdered by men that identify as trans women or non-binary. This culminated in a moment of silence for those lives. After we completed our speeches and held a moment of silence for the lives ended by men that consider themselves both trans women and non-binary. We descended and crossed a small street, Fallon Street, and down the hill to Lake Merritt Boulevard to hold our banners so we could face the traffic. I'd suggested lining the street because this way we could at least get our message out to drivers passing by. We stood on Lake Merritt Boulevard for maybe half an hour or so. We received a few honks of support, which is great, but the traffic wasn't dense enough to make it worth staying there. One of the participants suggested walking to the promenade at Lake Merritt, which had much more foot traffic. What you may not really be able to see from the video is there's a lake behind us. Naturally, on a morning with a bit of break from recent rain, people would be strolling by. This, of course, created more opportunities to expose those passersby to our message. It was also suggested this was a great place to take photos, especially ones where you could stand with our back to the courthouse, and that might be very nice to have images of us holding our banners with that courthouse in a more distant background. I now know that the name of that promenade is actually Lake Merritt Amphitheater. So we didn't know that detail at the time. As the name suggests, it's an amphitheater, not strictly a promenade. We arrived at the amphitheater and stood presenting our banners just briefly before a woman approached to engage with us on the substance of our demonstration. This bystander is the woman whose exasperated voice you hear in the body cam recording during the attack. She was actually very pro-trans identifying male when she approached. She told us she could agree with us that Dana Rivers is a man, but feared that he may be subject to violence if housed with men. I would have loved to ask her what she thought about the violence he might inflict on female inmates and whether she thought they might be worthy of our protection as well. But I didn't. We weren't there for that. We were there for the silent vigil in that moment. And also, the trans identity supremacists were already approaching. The attack was swift. I didn't see it coming. At least 6, but maybe as many as 12, mostly men, swarmed quickly and efficiently, though they were completely disguised, betraying their awareness of the fact that they are neither stunning nor brave. We could tell they were men. We could easily tell from the proportions of their bodies. One started by pushing an umbrella, I think, into Kara, the purpose of which I'm still not clear on. Another forced a few of us back by riding his motorcycle directly into us. They pelted us with eggs, pies, and forcefully wrestled our banners away. This group of mostly men had clearly taken the time to orchestrate exactly how they would attack. Our women sustained hits to their heads, faces, necks. And I'm pretty strong, but I was sore for an hour or two from having the banner yanked so forcefully out of my arms. As you can hear from the video, the woman bystander that was so pro-trans woman just moments before then was completely beside herself as and after we were attacked. She couldn't have imagined that anyone would swoop in and blitz us so violently for being a group of women merely holding banners. If her reaction is any indication, this strategy could indeed be a very good one. So I will stop here for my part and hand it off to Kara.
I wanted to title this, They Show Us Who They Are, Believe Them. And part of the reason I think that's so important is that these violent men are showing us exactly who they are. And I really want all of us who are fighting for the sex-based rights of women and girls to stop being shocked about their absolute misogyny and their absolute violence. So this is a close-up of the side of my head after a man threw a raw egg directly at me. All of the white that you see there is eggshell. And you can't really see very clearly in that photo, but there's raw egg dripping all down that side of my neck and down my chest and into my shirt. And again, you can see all of the eggshell that is plastered all over me and my coat. So that's an even closer one. And you can see sort of how red my ear is. You can see behind me is our friend Melinda, who is calling 911. The police, by the way, were quite interested and wanted to help, but they were unable to locate the men who had attacked us. And of course, the men are not identifiable in any of the videos. So the men who attacked us almost certainly will not be apprehended in any way. So this is Lierre with pie all over her face and head. So this is our friend Arla, who was also hit in the face with a pie. So this is sort of what we dealt with in the aftermath of this violent attack. Nonetheless, we were in quite good spirits. As Lierre said, we did a really good job. We maintained our dignity. We maintained our composure. We did not fight back. We did not yell. We did not taunt. We did not do anything to the men who were attacking us. And, as you can see, we're kind of standing there enjoying our time. So this is another one of us standing there. The women in that particular photo are the ones who took the brunt of the eggs and the pies. The woman on the far right there with the short blonde hair, that's a woman named Amy. She's one of the women who, one of the men ran their bicycle directly into her body. But we're not going to let them, we're not going to let them get us down. So as I said, we remained in good spirits. So we had some good media coverage. Now, what you're seeing here is just a screenshot that I took. It's not a video itself, so we're not going to play that. But so this happened on the very day of the action. And I put the URL there, which I know you can't see, but I wanted to put it there sort of for posterity. And I'm happy to share the URLs to the media links that I'm going to provide in the chat. But the point here is that there are the four of us, right? Arla, myself, Lierre, and Jesika. And the reason that we have this is that one of the women who was there to support us, she was on it. As soon as we were done with the action, as soon as the men took off, she said, okay, I need all of you to stand there and we're going to do an interview. And that interview is, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 minutes long. It's very short, but we were able to say exactly what happened. So it was immediately after it happened. It could not have been more fresh in our minds. The woman who recorded us had not herself been ambushed. She arrived moments after the whole thing was over. And she had the presence of mind to say, okay, let's get this interview on tape right now. Because the rest of us, although we were in good spirits, we didn't quite have the presence of mind to know exactly what our next steps should be. But she said, let's do this. Let's do this interview. Almost immediately, she sent it to her friends at the Post Millennial. And we did something that's very important, which is we promised the Post Millennial that they would have exclusive rights to use it. And because we took all these steps really in the immediate aftermath of the action, we were able to get some pretty good coverage in the Post Millennial that day. So this is from the Epoch Times, which came out the following day. Again, I put the URL there. I'm happy to put it in the chat so you can link to it. And this is the video that you watched. We gave the Epoch Times the body camera footage that you have seen, and they got it up in the paper the very next day with some very good coverage, which, really it's framed is exactly as it happened. It's framed as women standing up for women and girls and men attacking us. Okay, so this was the next day. This is in Fox News. This is a man named Jesse Waters has a program, and the guy you're seeing is, of course, Douglas Murray. And Douglas Murray went on and did what I think was overwhelmingly a good interview with Jesse Waters. So it's a great interview, and I hope everyone watches it. And Douglas Murray does a fantastic job of framing this all as men attacking women. He says, this has been going on for a while now. A lot of us have been talking about it, and this is men attacking women. And I thought he really did a fabulous job. What I'm less excited about is the fact that Jesse Waters, in his introduction, framed it as a brawl between trans activists and feminists. And that's not fair, because we were not doing any brawling. We were standing there in silent solidarity with incarcerated women. So if I had been doing that interview, I would have wanted to contradict that narrative. And I didn't think Douglas Murray did quite as good a job as he could have at contradicting that framing. And then I know this is something that many of us struggle with, which is, many of us who were actually there would have been quite pleased to go on and have a conversation about what happened. And, many of us are a little bit tired of watching men talk about this issue when those of us who are directly impacted would be more than happy to join them. Okay, so then in the next couple of days, Fox News invited me to be on Tucker Carlson, but that had to get rescheduled. I'm sure that's no one's fault. It just happened. But of note, with that, even though it's been less than a week, we're out of the news cycle. That's how fast this goes. Our action is out of the news cycle, within a couple of days. So I just want all of us to be mindful of that. We need to get our media on our actions. We need to turn it all around very quickly. And then our friends showed us who they are. So this is in a magazine called East Bay, Indie Bay. It's an independent, magazine for the San Francisco Bay Area. And when we went back to the house after the action, we were just talking and I sort of wondered aloud, I wonder what they did with our banners. Well, now we know exactly what they did with our banners. They're quite proud of it. I'm about 99% certain that the man on the left of our screen holding the banner is the guy who threw the egg at my head, because you can see it in the video. And I just want to say, it's interesting to me that this is their tactic, because the man who they stood up for was convicted of arson in addition to 3 counts of first-degree murder. So to stand up in support of a man who's been convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder, as well as arson, and then yourself to commit arson, is maybe not the best look. This is just more showing them destroying. So I wrote a Substack, which Jesika mentioned and Rosa put in the chat. Thank you so much, Rosa. And I tweeted about it. This is a record of women's dissent. That Substack, as of this morning, it had almost 3,000 views, which is pretty good for my Substack. We're doing it again. So we need to show these men that we're not going to be deterred. What it says on the slide there is that this is scheduled for December 19th. That is the plan as of this moment, but we're talking about possibly exploring different dates. But our plan is to have the exact same banner, go to the exact same location, and execute the exact same plan. And, we will show them we're not going to be deterred. We're going to continue standing up for Patricia Wright and Charlotte Reed and Benny Wright, who were the 3 victims of Dana Rivers' vicious murders, as well as incarcerated women all over California, all over the United States, and all over the world. Thank you very much.